Authoritarian plutocrats, and they just have to be stood up against. We'll be right back with Lord Monckton.
We're on the march. The empire's on the run. Alex Jones and the GCN Radio Network.
A chemical spill contaminating the water supply in 9 West Virginia counties.
This year alone, over 300,000 people in West Virginia had their drinking water contaminated.
What are the health effects of having these drugs in our drinking water?
It's forced medical treatment without the consent of residents.
My friends, water filtration is one of the most basic actions you can take to protect you and your family from the harmful toxins and heavy metals in your tap water.
On average, the county says it sprays with the glyphosate at least once a week.
Few filters cut out the glyphosate that is found in water supplies worldwide. Remove pesticides, herbicides, chloramines, hydrofluorosilicic acid, sodium hexafluorosilicate.
Fluoride, it is in tea, it's in coffee, it's in water, it's in bread, it's in toothpaste.
It is our responsibility to protect our families. The establishment's not going to do it. It's time to take action. It's time to filter our water. Visit InfoWarsStore.com and use promo code WATER to get 10% off their entire family of incredible products. Or call toll-free 888-253-3139. From the water table to our soils to the atmosphere itself, our world is becoming more and more toxic each and every day. But it's not just the air outside that's toxic. Indoor air has been shown to have 2 to 5 times higher concentrations of pollutants than even outdoor air. And most Americans spend 90% of their time inside using toxic chemicals within their homes. There are more than 42 million smokers in the United States. Well over 1,000 types of mold and mildew linked to numerous conditions. And don't forget the fact that 6 million Americans live with pets they're allergic to as well. When I began to research these statistics, it was clear to me it was time to start cleansing my lungs in order to combat the toxic environment that we cannot escape but that we can fight back against. Made with organic and wild cultivated herbs and manufactured in the USA, the new InfoWars Life Lung Cleanse is here in a convenient spray bottle that can be brought with you throughout any toxic environment. Now available exclusively at InfoWarsLife.com or by calling toll-free 888-253-3139.
I don't know what it is. Ralph just won't pay any attention to me. When he comes home from work, all he ever does is play video games and go to sleep. It's like I don't even exist.
Oh, Betty, that's just awful.
Does this seem familiar? If the answer to this question is yes, then listen carefully. Toxic pesticides, GMO foods and additives, BPA plastics, contaminated water supplies. Many of these toxic additives are deliberately engineered to attack and weaken human masculinity. It's part of the eugenics population control movement. Look it up. If men are more interested in online gaming than they are in their wives, a serious population crisis is soon to follow. Energize the man in your life with Super Male Vitality from InfoWarsLife.com. It's designed to aid the body in ways that help invigorate your natural systems without artificial testosterone, completely free of GMOs, harmful additives, gluten, and is made right here in the USA. Get your Super Male Vitality right now at InfoWarsLife.com or call 1-888-253-3139.
Live from Austin, Texas, broadcasting worldwide, it's Alex Jones.
It's been banned all over the country. Colleges are saying it's racist if you have a fiesta party at your fraternity with Mexican food. Toga parties are next. They're saying no one can dress up in Halloween costumes of geisha girls, cowboys, or Indians. This is the total control of reducing the language and making everything a faux pas. And it ties into this shutting down information and these people calling themselves liberals when they are the opposite. They're authoritarians. We'll talk to Lord Monckton more about that and talk about the latest scandals and where this fight is going, because we told you this 6 years ago and now it's happened. They've shut down over 500 different power plants in the country. Coal-powered plants, they're totally clean. Only water vapor and carbon dioxide comes out. And in many areas, power prices have doubled. On average, they're up over 30%. And it's bankrupting the country. China gets 3 a week. We get more than 3 a week shut down. Now they want to shut down more than 1,000 more. Do the math. It's incredible. It's bring us to our knees. We're going to break down Agenda 21 with Lord Monckton in a moment. Speaking of Agenda 21, we sell Rosa Koire's book. By the way, she's a liberal and Democrat out in California that woke up to this and was a city, county planner, zoning person, and was thought, this is incredible. She wrote her book. It's a short book. It's available at InfoWarsStore.com. And it's great to give to friends and family that aren't awake, to county commissioners, city council people. It's just one of hundreds of books we carry at InfoWarsStore.com. The books, the films, the liberty-promoting pro-gun and more apparel, Made in America. Made-in-1776.com takes you right to the subsection of InfoWarsStore.com, where you can find all the Made in America paraphernalia, golf shirts, you name it. And your purchase of these fine products supports our endeavor. They are war bonds in the info war against the globalists, and we're having a major effect. So many times it's InfoWars and a constellation of other liberty media worldwide that is holding the line and pushing back. UKIP's being demonized and saying, they're racist. We ought to shut them down in England because it's the fastest growing party in England and now in Europe. Kind of Ron Paul-esque, just libertarian. This is happening. And, of course, Lord Monckton is one of the founders of UKIP. So it's so important to support real independent media, even if you don't totally agree with it, if it's basically pro-liberty. Because what Lord Monckton said is so key, and I want him to elaborate on this because it's so important. And I don't want it to get lost in translation or kind of fall into the cracks. He said collectivists have a leg up, not individually. Individually, they're failures. And they've got university studies out of Canada that they're 6 times more likely to steal. Their families don't last. These are terrible people. They're weak people. So they seek power in a gang. They seek power in a cult. They seek power in a combine. They seek power in a swarm like locust. And individualist, we all have different views on the world, even if we may agree on like 90%. We have different perspectives. We're our own people. And so we're not joiners. And we don't tend to, we tend to give charity-wise more than anybody else, conservatives, libertarians, the statistics are worldwide. But we don't unify that often because we are individualists, as you just said. So it's so important to buy the products, to promote the radio shows, the news websites, that the FCC came out last week, the FCC chairman, and said, no, this will censor the Drudge Report and other libertarian conservative sites. The Republican leadership wants the real Tea Party shut down with the Democrats. They're the corrupt ruling class that's not free market. And they're branding, if you're pro-gun or anti-Obamacare, that's a total scam, that you're racist. Senator Rockefeller, I played the clip earlier in the hour. We'll play it again. This is what's happening. And these are real authoritarians. They need to be called out for it. They're very dangerous. So, again, go to InfoWarsStore.com. We don't get taxpayer money like MSNBC or NPR. We are supported by viewers like you who support our sponsors, like MyPatriotSupply.com/Alex. Best storable foods out there, last 20 years, non-GMO, great customer service. MyPatriotSupply.com/Alex, 866-229-0927. Support our sponsors. Support our local AM and FM affiliates. Go to InfoWarsLife.com. We've developed the Nascent iodine that's so good for the glands and helps protect the thyroid from types of radioactive isotopes. People are so, on average, deficient in this. It's done wonders for me and my health. We've got the Super Male Vitality, 8 concentrated herbs that give me such vitality, libido, you name it. You've heard the rave reviews from listeners. Try it. All you've done is support the show, and then you'll be blown away by how powerful it is, or you'll be the first bad review we've gotten. Lung cleanse, all of it. InfoWarsLife.com. Check it out today or call toll-free 888-253-3139. But, Lord Monckton, I want you to recap and expand on what you just said, because it was Benjamin Franklin that said we all hang together or hang separate. That's why I don't infight with libertarians or paleo-conservatives or constitutionalist, Confucius, Confucian-type liberty lovers, because I do realize the collectivists crave power and crave destroying individuals. Why do you think that the collectivists, the authoritarians, have such a vitriolic hatred of families, of male masculinity, of independent beauty and freedom and wealth? It's just so alien to those of us. I'm not putting us on a pedestal. I'm just saying who I am, who you are. I crave liberty. I crave the animating contest of competition. I crave diversity and real dynamic human spirit. And I would be embarrassed to use tactics against my competition to try to shut them down. But in this authoritarian world now, it's more than just liberalism, fake liberalism. It's a craven, wicked desire to just cheat and steal. And people think being dishonorable now is a way to get ahead. What do you call this? Just societal rot that we're facing?
This has happened time and again throughout history. And it always ends in the same way. It ends because eventually the totalitarians become so arrogant and so cruel to their fellow men that their fellow men who previously hadn't been able to stand together and unite finally do so and stand up against them. And in fact, going back to your example of what happened in the decades following the French Revolution, when eventually Napoleon emerged as the dictator of France, and then went around doing bilateral country-to-country deals between him and them to lock countries in where he wanted them, then he would invade them. And then they couldn't do anything back because they'd already signed a treaty with him. Eventually, after enough countries had thus been gobbled up by Napoleon, they banded together and stood together against him. And even if the Battle of Waterloo had not been the moment at which he was finally defeated, he had already by then been politically defeated because a grand alliance against him had been formed. And much the same happened really before the Second World War, where countries like Britain refused to get into alliances with other countries against Hitler, because they didn't want another war. Well, of course, nobody wants another war, but the fact was, if they didn't have one, Hitler was going to dominate Europe by exactly the same techniques of a combination of adroit diplomacy and brute force and will that Napoleon had previously used, and Hitler modeled himself very much on Napoleon. And so they did it then, and eventually Hitler pushed it too far, and the world ganged up against him, and he was stopped. Now, the difficulty we now face, Alex, is, as I was saying earlier, a unique situation in which totalitarianism, or groupthink, has gone global. And this globalization of groupthink is an extremely difficult thing to deal with because, to a greater or lesser degree, every country, even in the once freedom-loving Western world, is now part of this. And the entire bureaucratic and governing class knows that it's more than its job is worth to dare to speak out against it. I'm going to give you an example from the University of Delaware, where a communist front group called Greenpeace, which pretends to be an environmental organization, but in fact was taken over by communists, 30 or 40 years ago now, and has been run as a front group.
And by the way, their founder is the one that blew the whistle on that and released the documents. That's a fact.
Patrick Moore, who has talked to me about it, and likewise is another founder, the late Eric Ellington, whom I knew well. And interestingly, when I first mentioned on your show some years ago that Eric Ellington, one of the founders of Greenpeace, had said that this had become taken over by the communists, the communists were very angry, and they then got in touch with me to say, well, what evidence do you have that there was anybody called Eric Ellington? And I said, well, his brother is still alive and living in Scotland, where he used to live. Why don't you get in touch with him? So they went quiet after that once they realized there was an Eric Ellington. He was a landscape photographer. He lived partly in Scotland, partly in Jersey. And he said to me very plainly, and he was not a political man, he said, look, we founded the organization to be a genuine environmental organization. That was our intention. Patrick Moore says the same. But, he said, then the communists suddenly took it over, and because we weren't political, we didn't know how to stop them. And within a few years, all of us who had founded it had left, not because we didn't believe we needed a cleaner and safer environment, but because we didn't believe Greenpeace any longer had anything to do with that. Now, this organization wrote to the University of Delaware, it's doing this all the time, and it made an extremely intrusive and elaborate freedom of information request against Professor David Legates, who happens to be a co-author of mine on a recent scientific paper and a bit of a friend. And they began saying, this was 4 years ago now, that they wanted 60 information in 60 different categories about his work on climate change. Now, under the law in the state of Delaware, the first state of the Union, as you know, one of the smallest, and unfortunately controlled largely by the left, Joe Biden's son at the moment is the Attorney General there. They have a Freedom of Information law, And this was exploited by